Cambridge Insider podcast time. Hello, everybody. It's a new day, it's a new podcast, and it's a new co host of the podcast. Miss Leanna Glass, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Super pumped to be here. Absolutely. New phase, new chapter. I'm not going to try and fill Mr. Craig Batson's shoes. I'm going to just bring in a new pair of shoes.
I think it's so important to do that because I'll be honest, I don't know if trying to fill his shoes is the right option. He was a unique character. Let's leave it at that.
Absolutely.
For our listeners, Miss Leanna Glass will be our co-host. We're very excited. I said this in a previous episode. I think she's going to be improving the standard of this podcast. And I don't mean that as an insult to Mr. Craig Batson. We're still very good friends. We keep in touch. But I am excited about some of the insights that she'll be sharing, given her experience in the industry and her experience traveling around the world. Leanna, maybe to kick things off, if you don't mind just introducing yourself. Maybe some of our listeners weren't fortunate enough to hear you in a previous episode where you were a special guest of ours. So maybe just introduce yourself as the co-host. Where you're from, what do you do, who are you?
Definitely. Well, I'm based out of Philadelphia, grew up in New Jersey. As I said in the first podcast I was a guest on, I did a lot of traveling throughout high school and college, which really shaped the value I feel there is in expanding worldviews and how that helps us in our everyday life and creating more peace in the world in the little way that we can. And that's why I'm honored to work for Cambridge Network and help high school students to have that experience where they're better understanding the world around them, the cultures around them, and people in general. And, I think studying in the US is a really life-shaping experience for them. So I'm happy to be an SDM. I'm a student development manager. I work with 5 or 6 schools in the Philadelphia area. And so, yeah, I have that on the ground perspective where I'm working directly with schools. It's been a tough year, so we're going to help everyone to see the light at the end of this tunnel. We are taking the exit out of this tunnel.
Love it. I love it. I love it. Philly, they call it the city of brotherly love. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you feel that on a day-to-day basis on the floor? Are people really friendly there?
Oof, that's a tough one, especially if any of our listeners know what Philadelphia sports fans are like. I am actually not a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I am a New York Giants fan, so I can't say I get along great with the people in Philadelphia.
It's a resilient town. We love all our Philly listeners.
Yes.
I do love the fact that you are an SDM, because I think a student development manager, because I think it adds that little extra element to the show and gives us that experience, like you mentioned, on the ground, working on a day-to-day basis with students. And ultimately, they're the reason why we're here, why we're all here. They're the reason we do the things we do, is to make sure that we provide excellent services and can help them realize some of the American dreams that they've had when it comes to high school education in the US. Leanna, it's awesome to have you. I'm very pumped to have you on the show. Listeners, drop us some fan mail, drop us some questions. You actually might have some questions now. Craig and I may have been so boring that you guys are just like, we have no questions. Now Leanna's come on the show. You guys might have some questions.
Happy to get to know our listeners, answer any questions, and happy to have our listeners get to know me a little bit. So very excited.
Awesome stuff. So I do want to, make this a very useful episode. Being your first episode, we want to kick it off with a bang. So we are going to talk vaccines, and it is certainly something that I feel like we've spoken about fairly regularly as they've been, as the vaccine conversation has been moving. But it is something that we've got to deal with, because it's something that's so important to our industry. So all of our listeners, I'll have our executive producer, Dean, post the CDC website, the link to the CDC website, which is where we get all of our information from. And it's what we're going to be chatting about today, because we want to leave our schools with a little bit of an idea about where we are vaccination wise. And the CDC website is certainly the place to get the most up-to-date information. You might be asking yourselves, why are vaccinations important? Well, this is really the light at the end of the tunnel. This is how we get some semblance of normalcy back when it comes to the industry, If we can vaccinate enough people on the ground, enough of the adult population, we are going to start seeing people open up to the idea of coming to the US, studying here. We're going to see the resurgence of the industry as a whole. So, and Leanna, I'd love to get your thoughts on some of these numbers that we do have here. But in terms of vaccinations, as I have a look at this website, we've got about 51.1% of people over the age of 18 in the US that have been vaccinated. This is huge news, or at least those are people, 51.1% that have had at least one dose, and then 33.3% that have had 2 doses. This is huge news because this is the start, hopefully, of the end of this pandemic for us.
Absolutely. And I've had schools in the past couple of weeks actually be transitioning into their last phases of cohorts entering back into schools and being on campus. And I know some of those students are starting to get vaccinated here in our area. And I think in most places around the country, anybody 16 years and older is eligible now for the vaccine. So, as Cambridge Network, we're not telling anybody they need to get vaccinated, but we want to make sure that everybody has access to that information. Like you said, CDC is absolutely the place to get it. And I think we are going to see semblances of normal as more and more people are vaccinated. I had my first student get vaccinated just this past week. He had no side effects. The host family is also vaccinated. So I'm vaccinated now. I can go back out and see them. I can plan maybe an outdoor gathering with them. So I'm definitely seeing some normalcy return. And, with that, we need to keep wearing masks. We need to keep social distancing. Keep following all those CDC preventative guidelines, because as we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, we are getting back to normal. We need to really finish this out strong.
Absolutely. Leanna, question for you. You said earlier on you work with about 5 to 6 schools. What is the feeling like on the ground with schools specifically? And you can shed some light here. I believe a lot of the school administrators, school teachers have already received their vaccinations as well. What is the feeling on the ground? Have those vaccinations rolled out amongst teachers?
Yeah, I know that a lot of the schools I work with are making it very easy for teachers to take time off to go and make that a priority. It's going to make students more comfortable, families more comfortable sending their kids back to school. And I don't think the value of that in-person learning in the classroom can be undersold. I mean, it is so important. I have students who I know would be doing much better if they were in the classroom on a day-to-day basis, working with their teachers and communicating in person. So the more and more people who can get vaccinated and return safely to school, the better, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So why is this important? Schools might be listening to this, say, we know about this, we've seen this across the country. I think one of the big reasons specifically from a marketing and a recruitment standpoint, as we look to market our programs, as we look to recruit new students, but even more importantly, as we look to bring some of our re-enrolling students back to the United States, back to in-person learning, we have to somehow shape a little bit of the narrative that's out there across the globe about the United States being an unsafe place. Yes, we had some disagreements as a country, especially early on. Things like masks and social distancing weren't always agreed upon. But my word, once it came to let's have a race about developing a vaccine and rolling it out, the US has come out on top. It's been incredible to see. So really, really important for our schools to start, and this is something that we want to leave you with as a school official, as a school administrator, to start having these conversations independently with their students, with their parents, because that's part of shaping the narrative that come the fall, we'll be fully back to some semblance of normal. You can come, we can get the in-person learning done. It's so important from a school's perspective to take this mantle and to run with it independently in terms of advocate for the school, advocate for your county, advocate for the vaccine rollout, advocate for the fact that it's safe in the classroom.
Definitely. And we've already seen so many colleges across the US announce that their students will need to be vaccinated in order to return in the fall. So that's my first point for a benefit to getting the vaccine. You might need it later on anyway when you do graduate. And then also just that as an SDM, I know that my words have a lot more power when they are backed by the schools. So having the schools back us up and put out information from the CDC and explain why they would like their students to be vaccinated, it's going to have a lot more power and drive than just Cambridge Network giving them the information. So the more schools can put out the benefits to being vaccinated, the better.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well said. It's so important. Schools, if you do not have, and again, I use the word independent because sometimes we do place a lot of emphasis on somebody like Leanna on Cambridge Network to do that communication for you. We're happy to do it, but it comes with so much more power when schools are releasing letters, speaking directly to families, using WeChat to communicate directly with students and saying, you know what, come August, come the fall of 21, we'll be in person. Things are starting to pick up. We've rolled out over 50% of our adult population has had at least one shot. Everybody's eligible for the vaccine. The US is coming back in a major way when it comes to international education. And that is most certainly the narrative that we've got to be pushing, because at an incremental level, that's going to help for our re-enrolling students. We're going to get them back on campus. And guess what? Once we get them back on campus, once we get those success stories going, students are having a great time, students are graduating to great colleges, come fall 2022, hopefully we'll see the payoff of those students when it comes to new recruitment, because kids are going to start saying, families are going to start saying, I want to go back to the US. That's a great place for me to earn my stripes and to be successful.
Definitely. And even if schools don't want to do that legwork in the communication to reaching students or reaching natural parents, put it on a letterhead, send your coordinator an email. Just anything coming from you directly will help in this effort.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Everybody, I believe, in the US that is eligible age-wise is now eligible to get that vaccine. So again, big up to everybody that's been working, from the scientists that developed these vaccines to lawmakers that made it possible, to, of course, our frontline staff and everybody that's now working hard to make sure that we're getting shots in arms and that we're getting back to where we deserve to be as a country. This is the #1 education destination for F1 high school students. We're excited to get you guys back. Ms. Leanna Glass, awesome to have you. First episode, quick little reflection time. How was your first episode?
It was, I'm not going to lie, I was a little nervous going into this, but I think you make it pretty easy. You're a great co-host. I'm excited to keep, upping my experience, getting better and better at this. So I appreciate our listeners hanging with me. First episode in the books, so it's an exciting time.
Excellent. I have to ask you this question. I'll ask it for the next 377 episodes that we'll do together. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Final thoughts. Let's see. Just to schools, keep getting that information out there. Keep giving your teachers and students the opportunity to get vaccinated, the information they need to get vaccinated. And we can't wait to get back into the field in person with each other and doing what we do best as SDMs too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well said. It's been awesome having you. To all of our listeners, thank you. Remember to like, listen, subscribe, send fan mail, send questions, do all those good things. Share the podcast. People want to know. People want to hear our voices, I believe. I don't know. Might be onto something completely different. We'll catch you around the next episode. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.